Hello, everyone. We are coming today again in the live to talk about the very important issue that grinding all Canadian people, especially the racialized people and the people of color. The issue is housing crisis. So we know that millions of people nationwide struggle to pay their rent, and in many places, only the privileged can afford to buy a home. When housing costs eat up most of a person's paycheck, they often have to make sacrifice, foregoing healthcare, education, and sometimes even food. 87% low-income tenant, 11.2 million households are living in unaffordable house, paying between 30 to 50% of their income on rent. Only 36 affordable and available rental homes exist for every 100 extremely low-income rental household. The nation's lack of affordable housing dismantles excess of poverty and keep millions from living into their full potential. Many low-income families are inadequately housed, overcrowded homes, poor living conditions. According to the Wellesley Institution, it says that tenants in low-income and racialized community experience higher rates of eviction. Between the March and July 2020, approximately 6,000 eviction applications were filed and a landlord not paying and outstanding. So this number might be increasing right now. So we are in here today to talk about this most urgent needs and pressing issue of the community. With me today, we have SAWRO Legal Clinic. They will going to be present the legal aspect also, and what is the legal right for the people to get housing. And we are not talking about only the affordable house. We need community housing, social housing, because the lack of community housing, social housing, the poverty is increasing. Affordable house is an issue, but on the top of these things, the main issue is community housing and social housing. The government is not talking for these things. They are always kind of negotiate with the owners, negotiate with the landlord, but do not want to give the full potentiality for the people, those who need the support right now. I have 3% for People Defense. This organization is doing lots of grassroots work to support the people, to raise their concerns, defend their right. And we have two wonderful politicians with us. One is Dolly and another one is Rima. Both are fighting in the House for us and raising all the issue that the community is pressing right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic has a color, and that is black and brown, because this pandemic hit it very hard to the community of the racialized people, South Asian people, color people. And when the government cannot deal these things properly, blame come to us, because they say our house is overcrowded, we like to do the party, and we have intergenerational housing system. This is not truth. The truth is our people working in the workplace that is very insecure. They get the contamination in their workplace and bring this contamination to the community. And then the community get contaminated. Our number is right now, ring the bell. Because right now, today, Oakleys has 330 active cases. That is not good for us. So I would like to hear from, first I'm going to present SAWRO. SAWRO is a legal clinic and South Asian legal clinic. SAWRO has a long-term relationship with the SAWRO. We did lots of work together in the community. I think everyone remembered that last year, 2019, when Tenant people got a notice of the rent increase, without discussing with the people, and this rent was so high, we bring SAWRO in here. We work together to fight to minimize the rent, and we work together to face the legal cause in the court. So SAWRO always supporting the communities people. We give lots of people, those who need the support for legal immigration, also family law, also housing law. The contact to the SAWRO, we refer them. And also the COVID-19 pandemic times, we circulated letter join with this SAWRO, the legal notice to the landlord, and also send this paper to the tenant that if they find it on any illegal eviction or any kind of push pressure to them to get the rent, they can contact it with us, and this is an illegal action from them. So I'm requesting SAWRO Faria Aziz and Jaslyn Kaur to talk about that, some of the legal aspect right now, and we want to hear a little bit more about the bill 184, right? 184, that what kind of protection tenant and we're going to, and what is the broken part of the bill 184, because bill 184 does not protect the poor people's right. So we want to hear from you that why this bill is not good and what kind of option should has to be in the bill. And we then, after this discussion, after you, then we're going to talk with the people defense, and we're going to hear from these two wonderful politicians, and then we're going to open it for the discussion. And we have lots of question answer we're going to come, and I'm going to request to be with us so then we can answer this question. So thank you, and I'm requesting Jaslyn and Faria Aziz, both are the lawyer. I'm not going to be present their own designation in here because they add their own designation for the community. So you can tell about a little bit yourself and talk about the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sultana. And as you said, SAWRO has had a long-standing relationship with SAWRO, and we've been really honored to be able to contribute to the great work that you guys are doing at Teesdale and in the broader community. While I'm going to be speaking with my colleague Freya today, I did want to note that the lawyer who generally has been has expressed this sort of presence that SAWRO has with SAWRO, unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it today, and so I'm stepping in for her. But Silmi Abdullah is generally the woman who any tenants or any representatives from the East End would get in touch with in order to contact our clinic. And that's usually just because she offers language-specific services. So a little bit about SAWRO, just very briefly. I'm sure many people are aware, but we are an ethno-specific legal clinic, which means that we're funded by Legal Aid Ontario, much like many of the community legal clinics, which serve a geographic area, so between very specific streets in Toronto and beyond. But our clinic has a much broader mandate. So just like our name says, we serve the South Asian legal needs within the province. So if you're South Asian, if you're resident in Ontario, regardless of what your status is in Ontario, you could be a visitor, you could be a citizen, you could just be passing through. If you are in Ontario and you have a legal question, if you're a low or no income having person, and if you fall within the certain scope of areas of law that we serve. So I can just go over those briefly: immigration, housing, certain administrative law matters like social assistance and employment, then you're welcome to contact us. We do not assist at this time with family or criminal law matters. But again, we're always happy to provide a referral or to provide brief services and legal information where we're able to. With that being said, having that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and move on just in the interest of time. Our legal clinic has seen a number of issues kind of come up during COVID. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Bill 184, and then I'm also happy to answer questions. Beyond that, you will probably hear my dog barking, and I'm sorry about that. But he seems to be a fixture in all of my presentations these days. Bill 184 it's been kind of marketed as something positive for tenants this year. And so it was passed into law. The name of it is actually absurdly long and is incredibly euphemistic. But the bill itself actually, it sheathes a much more insidious provision, and one that actually threatens the security and the procedural fairness around tenants' legal rights. So specifically, tenants prior to the passing of Bill 184, were they to be legally evicted under the Residential Tenancies Act, the law in Ontario for housing, they would generally have the right to a fair process, which involved a hearing before the Landlord and Tenant Board. And before that hearing ever took place, generally there was at least one notice that would be provided. It had to be provided on a form that's provided by the Landlord and Tenant Board. So it's a very specific form with Landlord and Tenant Board written at the top. And usually there's a certain amount of notice that comes with that form. So you're given a notice by your landlord. You have anywhere between 7 and 120 days before any action is taken. And then beyond that point, if you don't agree with whatever is written on the notice, say you're late in rent, say your landlord has someone moving into the unit, if you don't agree, you go to a hearing and you explain it to a neutral third party. With Bill 184, they've introduced a kind of a loophole that avoids the whole hearing process, and in so doing, kicks tenants out a lot faster. So this loophole basically says that if you're able to come to an agreement with your landlord because you're late on rent, and in that agreement you agree to repay a certain amount, once you've made that agreement with your landlord, if you've put it in writing, it doesn't have to be a formal form. It doesn't have to be a form provided by the landlord tenant board. And in fact, there doesn't have to be a hearing or anybody present except for you and your landlord. What that does is it creates a power imbalance in which a tenant doesn't necessarily know what their rights are. They could be agreeing to repay a certain amount because they've lost their job. And they say, I just need a month. I need a month to get a job and I'll find myself able to pay within 30 days. 30 days later, you still don't have a job, your bills are racking up, rent is the last thing on your mind. Say you have kids, you're not in a good situation to pay, and 30 days later, your landlord can take that written agreement, they can go to the tribunal and they can have an eviction order issued against you. After that happens, they can then take that successful order for eviction by the tribunal, take it to the sheriff, who is the one that can enforce a legal eviction, and they can have you removed from your home, and it can all be legal. So there's generally at that point very little that you can do. If this does happen, we normally encourage anybody to come to a legal clinic, especially ours, just because in situations like this, we've got experience with it, but also we're always happy to provide the advice. As a specialty clinic, we're not bound by neighborhoods. And so we can at least give you some kind of guidance on where you need to go or what your local legal clinic is in order to kind of take steps beyond that. So again, in the interest of time, there's a little bit more to it, but I think that I can see that there's a number of panelists, all of whom probably have thoughts on this. I am going to go ahead and hand it back to you, Sultana.
I would like to hear, the Faria wants to go right now, or we will going to hear a little bit. Faria?
No, I can wait for the questions because Jaslyn, I think she mentioned about the Bill 184 and the challenges the tenants would face if the tenants were asked to sign this agreement. So it's the basic thing is that it's advisable for tenants if a landlord offers such a settlement before they sign any documents that they reach out to legal services and get legal advice before they sign into any of such documents. So probably I'll wait until question and answer sessions. Maybe we can.
Thank you. So far, I understand that this kind of phony bill that, okay, you have an opportunity to communicate and making kind of arrangement with your landlord. And then if you cannot meet that deadline, then you will be subjected for the eviction. But if the situation right now is very uncertain, how could one person can say that next month my income will be okay? So like this bill has to be completely said that during this pandemic period, there will be no eviction, there will be no rent increase, even though like they need to think, because 1-bedroom apartment right now we pay $1,900. It is kind of inhuman. Looks like that is skyrocket. We cannot reach. In that sense, the government should say that we are going to assess the people income and rent has to be matched with the people income. So if my living wage is only $14, rent has to be $1,200 for 1 bedroom. That will be the match, and that match is need right now for the people who are under poverty to survive in here. So I want to request People Defense. There is 3 persons in here: Hamna Mughal, Sabana Mullah, and Dil Begum. Dil Begum is from our community. Okay, so we want to hear from you, all of your experience when you are organizing the people in this community to find it out what the people said about this thing. What is their living experience about the housing?
Hi, yeah. So my name is Hamna. This is Shabana, and that's Dilapa. Yeah. So they're with the Eastern Tenants Union, and I'm with People's Defense. I'm gonna. I think even before we get into like what the 9 months of organizing, tenants organizing has looked like, I wanted to also highlight what the housing crisis has specifically looked like, because definitely Bill 184 has completely intensified the housing crisis, but we were already stuck in this crisis long before that. And I think that us as the Eastern 50 here, we have had like the first-hand experience with Bill 184 and Section 78. So yeah, just sort of starting off with that, I think that it's really important to understand that housing was long unaffordable before COVID-19. There's big corporate landlords who have completely monopolized the housing market, which, you know, incentivizes real estate investment trust privatization and complete price gouging and profiteering with tenants in the city of Toronto. And what we're seeing is an eviction storm right now that is targeting working class people, and they're being forced to pay for a crisis that they did not create. Meanwhile, large landlords have remained unaffected by this COVID-19 pandemic. There's a professor, Martine August, who is a professor of planning at University of Waterloo. She has contributed a lot to researching extensively on this matter. And she was asked, can landlords afford to forgive rent? And the answer was obvious. Of course, they can afford to. She illustrates that most corporate landlords profit about 60% on the rent they receive. So that means only 40% is going to expenses and salaries, which is interesting because we live in buildings that are in a complete state of disrepair. So I don't really know if it's going towards expenses at all. But I think it's important to observe that these numbers, what they mean, because they reveal that tenants pay far more, and I believe Sultana Abba was mentioning that as well. Tenants pay far more than required to keep the buildings running. And on top of it, there's constant rent increases, and there's also above the board guideline rent increases. I think Teesdale had one. I can't recall if it was 5% or something. And I know that tenants fiercely fought that. However, the LTB is bankrupt, and it didn't fully assure like a win for all the tenants because the cards are stacked against us at the LTB. And I think we can get into that in a second. But I also think it's really important to highlight the rent eviction crisis that's going on. There's another reason why these landlords continue to profit in high rates, because what they do is there's a one-bedroom apartment that's going for about $1,200 for one person, and right next door someone else is paying $1,800 for that unit. And the way they do that is you know, they make conditions so unlivable and unaffordable for tenants that eventually tenants move out. And that is when they come and do repairs and they hike up the rent. And even in our buildings right now, that's exactly what's been happening. And these landlords ultimately, COVID crisis or not, they wanted rent eviction to take place so they can gentrify these working class neighborhoods in the city, working class immigrant neighborhoods in the city. So I think in a nutshell, with millions of dollars in profit, these large landlords can easily provide rent forgiveness and still be able to function both in their personal lives and professional lives. I think that I believe Martine August was even providing a specific number around most of these companies will exceed in their operating costs by $180 million, even after they provide rent forgiveness to tenants. So that's a huge number. However, I just want to highlight that our fight has revealed that it's not that simple, right? These corporate landlords have been using mom and pop landlords as human shields by crying poor and making it seem like there's no other options available for them. When I think it's really important to provide the fact that only 3% of the city is, you know, small landlords. And it's clear that these corporate landlords are, you know, using their financial partners and investors and treating housing like, I think the best example I can think of is mining, because when you go somewhere to mine to extract the value from the land, you absolutely give no regard for the life before or after, which I think is a great example for, you know, Canada with the fracking that goes on Indigenous land here. So I think that just sort of like contextualizing the root cause of this housing crisis all the way back to the 1990s, where this profit-making model was enabled in Ontario by the deregulation of rent control. So I think it goes to show that there's a direct link to this housing crisis and the ongoing privatization of this province. We've seen it long before Duck Ford, and we're seeing it further intensified under Duck Ford. There's an example of the seniors long-term care home situation right now. One of the landlords in our neighborhood, Rani Management, also owns Rika long care centers, and we've seen hundreds and hundreds of deaths there just because they didn't want to provide PPE, right? They're that greedy that they will rather see hundreds of seniors die instead of actually look after people, the most vulnerable in our society. So more on Rani Management later, because they're one of the biggest evictors in the city. But I think that, as is being pointed out, that working class people, and specifically racialized working class people, are being robbed in their city from their homes, health, employment, and with so much to lose and being backed in a corner, our people have done what they've always done best. We come from communities where we've long fought oppressors, and we did that by coming together, and that's exactly what's happened here. However, before I hand it off to my sisters here, I think that we shouldn't just focus on statistics and numbers and jargons to understand a very simple thing, that no one should be going homeless in a global pandemic or not in a global pandemic. We live in a society that's fundamentally structured in a wrong way, where we put profit over people, where the rich continue to get rich and the poor is getting poorer. I mean, right now, there's barely any jobs. I know people who are receiving calls from the CRA, letters from the CRA asking for their CERB money back when there's no jobs in sight. That's ridiculous. And the government has nothing to offer. The government's completely bankrupt. I mean, Doug Ford promised that he was gonna, support tenants. Oh, you know what? Choose your family. Don't if you cannot pay rent, don't pay rent. But he went behind our backs and he, passed Bill 184. In fact, he expedited the process of passing that bill when he should have tabled it in a global pandemic. And now, as I believe Justine was pointing out, like what that really means for tenants, it's you're a dollar short, a day late, you're out. So I think for working class renters, losing their homes means losing their ability to any sort of public health guidelines. We're going to see an increase of the pandemic. We're already seeing 2,000 cases a day, and it has a huge impact on mental health. And I think all of those things should be bridged. I've heard stories from Crescent Town and Teesdale where tenants, there's one particular tenant who was threatened with deportation if they didn't sign their repayment plan. Like, that's how tenants are being threatened. There's immunocompromised 70-year-old tenants in these buildings that are being pushed to pay their rent, even though they can't afford to. And, Isabella Garcia, the property manager, she's quite popular. Reema's familiar with her, how she's gone around harassing people in this neighborhood, including the seniors in our community. So just the last thing, I think that it's interesting that political pundits, journalists, academics, everyone's always raising this question around how do we stop homelessness from growing? And I think that the answer is simple. You just physically stop it from happening. You stop evictions, you stop sheriffs, you stop the police from coming into your community to make sure your community is safe. So I think that I've basically gone off on a rant and said all the boring stuff. There's a lot of exciting stuff that's happened in the past 9 months that Dilapa and Shabana are going to expand on how we started a tenants union and are confronting some of the most powerful people in society, landlords.
Hi, good morning, good evening, everyone. I am Dil Begum from East York Tenant Union. I would like to speak in Bangla to better understanding to my community people, and I hope you all take it comfortably. So, ধন্যবাদ সুলতানা আপা আমাকে সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন কোভিডের কারণে আমরা ফর্ম করেছি, কিন্তু এর আগে থেকে আমরা বিভিন্ন এই বিল্ডিং আমি 9% থাকি। এই বিল্ডিং এ কোভিডের আগে অনেক ধরনের সমস্যা ছিল, বাট যেটা আমরা কখনো আলাপ আলোচনা করতে পারিনি বিভিন্ন কমিউনিকেশন গ্যাপের কারণে। যেমন ধরনের বিল্ডিং এ অনেক সময় এলিভেটরের সমস্যা ছিল, পার্কিং এর সমস্যা, লবিতে ডাস্টের সমস্যা ছিল, রিপেয়ারিং এর সমস্যা ছিল। তো এই সমস্যাগুলো, রিপেয়ারিং এর সমস্যাগুলো বা আমরা যা এলিভেটরের সমস্যা, এগুলো দেখা গেল যে বিভিন্ন সেলিব্রেশনের সময় আমাদের দেখা গেল 4টা এলিভেটরের মধ্যে 2টা এলিভেটর কাজ করছে। আমরা অনেক এই কিচেন টাউন এরিয়াতে আমরা মোর দেন 1000 উপরে টেনেন্ট বাস করে, কিন্তু এনাফ না দুইটা এলিভেটর। বাট আমরা কার কাছে বলবো, কোথায় বললে আমাদের এই সমস্যাটার সমাধান হবে, আমরা খুঁজে পাচ্ছিলাম না। অনেক সময় দেখা গেল যে এলিভেটরের সামনে আমরা দাঁড়িয়ে আছি আধা ঘন্টা মানে 45 মিনিট, কিন্তু একে অপরের সাথে কথা বলছে যে কিভাবে এটা সমাধান করা যায়। অনেকে বলছে যে আমাদের কথা কেউ শুনবে না, ম্যানেজমেন্ট আমাদের কথা শুনবে না, কারণ আমরা ব্রাউন, আমরা ইমিগ্রেন্ট, আমরা নেগলেক্টেড, অনেকটা এরকমই। তখন আমার খুব খারাপ লেগেছে। আমি যখন 90 সেন্টে মুভ করি তখন থেকে আমার ভিতরে একটা কষ্টই অনুভব হতো যে আমরা ভাড়া দিচ্ছি, আমরা ওয়ার্কিং ক্লাস পিপল এখানে থাকি মোস্টলি, আমাদের কষ্ট করে উপার্জন করি, আমরা চাকরি করি মনে হয় রেন্ট দেওয়ার জন্য, আমাদের আর কোনো রিক্রিয়েশন নেই অনেস্টলি। তাদেরকে খুশি রাখার জন্য আমাদের কাজ করতে হয়। সেই ক্ষেত্রে যদি আমরা এলিভেটর সুযোগটা না পাই, আমাদের রিপেয়ারের সুযোগটা না পাই, এটা আমাদের জন্য অনেক বেশি কষ্টকর। এটা আমি আগে থেকে ফিল করেছি। তারপরে কোভিড যখন আসে, কোভিডের এই রিপেয়ারের অনেক সময় দেখা গেল কি, আরেকটু কথা অ্যাড করি যে অনেকে রিপেয়ারের ব্যাপারটা নিয়ে ম্যানেজমেন্টের কাছে গেলেও ম্যানেজমেন্টকে বোঝাতে মানে ব্যর্থ হয়, এটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ ব্যারিয়ারের কারণে অনেস্টলি। কারণ এই বিল্ডিং এ আমরা ম্যাক্সিমামই আমি দেখেছি যে আমাদের ভাষার একটা সমস্যা আছে, আমরা এক্সপ্লেইন করতে পারি না, এবং আমরা এক্সপ্লেইন করতে না পারার কারণে ম্যানেজমেন্ট একটু লুক ডাউন করে দেখে টেনেন্টদের। এবং কোভিড ক্রাইসিস যখন আসে তখন দেখা গেল যে আমরা খেয়াল করলাম কিছু প্রতিবেশী, আমাদের সবাই না, রেন্টের ক্রাইসিস এবার রেন্ট দেওয়ার জন্য তারা একটা সমস্যার সম্মুখীন হয়, কিভাবে রেন্টটাকে কমিয়ে আনা যায় বা কিভাবে রেন্টের রিডাকশন করা যায়, এগুলো নিয়ে আমরা পরস্পর দেখলাম যে একটা সমস্যা আমাদের নেইবারদের মধ্যে হচ্ছে। তো আমি শাবানা আপা, আমি মেনশন করছি, জিনাত, আরো 4-5 জন মিলে আমরা যারা সচেতন তারা আমরা এক হয়ে চিন্তা করলাম কি করা যায়। আসলে আমি অতটা ফ্লুয়েন্ট না, আই এম নট ফ্লুয়েন্ট ইন ইংলিশ, বাট আমি কমিউনিকেট করতে পারি ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে, আই ক্যান এক্সপ্লেইন জাস্ট কি হচ্ছে এগুলো আমি বলতে পারি। তো আমরা সবাই মিলে ঠিক করলাম যে ঠিক আছে, আমরা এক হয়ে আমরা যারা এই সমস্যার মধ্যে আছেন, যারা ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে কথা বলতে অসুবিধা বোধ করে, তাদেরকে আমরা সাপোর্ট দিব। এবং কিভাবে সাপোর্ট দিব, এটা থেকেই আসলে আমরা টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়নকে ফর্ম করি। আমরা 6-7 জন মিলে আমরা ঠিক করলাম যে আমরা যারা কোভিডে রেন্ট নিয়ে যারা সমস্যায় আছেন তাদেরকে আমরা ব্যাকআপ দিব, ম্যানেজমেন্টের কাছে যাব তাদেরকে রেন্ট রিলিফের জন্য অথবা রেন্ট রিডাকশনের জন্য। তো আমরা এই থেকে আমরা আমাদের নিজেদের তাগিদে, নিজেদের প্রয়োজনে টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়নটা ফর্ম করি, কারণ সাহায্য ছাড়াই। এবং আমরা নিজেরাই একে অপরের সাথে কথা বলতে বলতে আমাদের ইউনিয়নটা আরো সংগঠিত হয়, আরো স্ট্রং হয়। এবং আমরা একই সমমনার কিছু লোক আমাদের ইউনিয়নে চলে আসে। আমরা কনভিন্স করতে পেরেছি যে আমাদের সাপোর্টের দরকার। সব টেনেন্টের কথা বলবো না, কিছু টেনেন্ট রেন্ট নিয়ে সমস্যায় পড়েছে, তাদেরকে সাপোর্ট করার জন্য আমরা এগিয়ে আসি। দেন এপ্রিলের শুরু থেকেই ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে আমরা যারা রেন্ট নিয়ে সমস্যায় আছে, আমাদের টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন, আমরা যারা টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন গঠন করছি তাদেরকে নিয়ে আমরা ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে কথা বলি যে তাদেরকে রেন্ট রিলিফ দেওয়ার জন্য। আমাদের 3টা ডিমান্ড ছিল ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে, সেটা হচ্ছে এক হচ্ছে রেন্ট রিলিফ or রেন্ট রিডাকশন, নো কোভিড এভিকশন, আর নাম্বার 3 হচ্ছে নো রেন্ট ইনক্রিজ ফর 3 years। এটা নিয়ে আমরা বারবার ম্যানেজমেন্ট এবং ল্যান্ডলর্ডদের সাথে কথা বলার চেষ্টা করি, কিন্তু ম্যানেজমেন্ট ব্যর্থ হয়েছে। They have failed to meet with us। এবং এটা শুধু একবার না, অনেকবার আমরা চেষ্টা করেছি। এবং আমি জানি রিমাও আমাদের সাথে ছিলেন বিভিন্ন সময়, কয়েক সময় 2-3 সময় রিমা ছিলেন, উনিও কথা বলেছেন। তো আমরা কোনোভাবেই আমাদের প্রিন্স ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে কথা বলতে পারিনি, আমাদের টেনেন্টদের অন বিহাফ অফ আওয়ার টেনেন্ট আমরা তাদের সমস্যা নিয়ে কথা বলতে পারিনি, কারণ তারা আমাদের সাথে দেখা করেনি, আমাদের সাথে নেগোশিয়েট করেনি। প্রকান্তরে কি হলো যে তারা আমাদেরকে 50 পিপল, ইস্টিয়র্ক 50, যেটাকে ইস্টিয়র্ক 50 হচ্ছে টিসডেল, ক্রিসেন্ট টাউন এন্ড গুডউড, এই ইস্টিয়র্কের এই 3টা জোনের 50টা পরিবার, সবাই না কিন্তু 50টা পরিবারকে এভিকশন কেস ফাইল করলো তাদের বিরুদ্ধে। এখানে আরেকটা জিনিস আমি আরেকটু অ্যাড করতে চাই যে আমাদের যে টেনেন্টরা রেন্ট দিতে অসুবিধা হচ্ছিল, তারা বলছিল যে ঠিক আছে মওকুফ না করো, রেন্ট রিলিফ না হোক, অন্তত আমরা রেন্ট দিতে চাই, কিন্তু আমাদের একটা পোর্শন আমাদেরকে যদি একটা 30% আর 40% যদি ডিডাক্ট করে, তাহলে বাকি এরিয়াটা তারা পার্শিয়ালি দিতে চেষ্টা করবে। কিন্তু তাতেও তারা মানে আমরা তাদের সাথে মানে ব্যর্থ হয়েছি, আসলে ম্যানেজমেন্ট ব্যর্থ হয়েছে আমাদের সাথে যোগাযোগ করতে, অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমি এটা বলবো। তারপরে আসে যে তারা 50টা পরিবারকে 50 পরিবারকে তারা এভিক্টেড কেস ফাইল করে এবং আমাদেরকে হিয়ারিং এর আমাদের এই 50টা পরিবারকে হিয়ারিং এর মুখোমুখি দাঁড়াতে হয়েছে। যেহেতু এর মধ্যে আমাদের টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন আরো স্ট্রং হয়েছে, আরো মানুষ আমাদের সাথে যুক্ত হয়েছে। আমরা বিভিন্ন ডোর টু ডোর গেছি আমাদেরকে সাপোর্ট করার জন্য। আমি জানি যে আমাদের অনেকেই ভাড়া দিতে পেরেছে এবং অনেকে ভাড়া ম্যানেজমেন্টের ভয়ও দিয়েছে, তারা নিজেরা টেবিলে খাবার নাই, তাদের কষ্ট হচ্ছে, কিন্তু তারা দিচ্ছে কারণ ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে কেউ লড়তে যাবে না। আমরা কথা বলে দেখেছি যে তারা ভয় পায় যে না, আমরা কোনো কথা বলবো না ম্যানেজমেন্টের সাথে, তারা জুইশ এই ধরনের কথা বলতেছিল আর কি, তারা শুনবে না কথা। তো এই কারণে ম্যাক্সিমামই ভাড়া দিয়েছে, কিন্তু এই 50টা পরিবার ব্যর্থ হয়েছে ভাড়া দিতে। ব্যর্থ হয়েছে মিনস তাদের ক্রাইসিস ছিল, কারণ অনেকের জব চলে গেছে, অনেকের আওয়ার কমে গেছে। দেখা গেল একজন মানুষ সংসারে আছে, ইনকাম করে, সিআরবি একজনই পাচ্ছে, কিন্তু তার ওয়াইফ হাউস ওয়াইফ উনি পাচ্ছেন না। যার ইনকাম মনে করেন যে $4000, উনি যদি ট্যাক্সি, আমাদের ভাই যদি ট্যাক্সি বা উবার চালান, $3,500 থেকে $4,000 ইনকাম করেন, যেটাতে তার ফ্যামিলিও চলে এবং সে তার পরিবারকেও সাপোর্ট দিতে পারে। কিন্তু সেই ইনকামটা যদি কমে 2000-এ চলে আসে, তার জন্য কতটুকু কষ্টকর হয়ে যায় রেন্টটা দিতে। তার তো অন্যান্য খরচ তো থেকেই যাচ্ছে, খাবারের খরচ থেকে যাচ্ছে, ইন্স্যুরেন্স, গাড়ির ইন্স্যুরেন্স বলেন, অন্যান্য আদার্স সব তো ঠিকই রয়ে গেছে, কিন্তু তার ইনকাম নেই। তো সে কি করবে, কিভাবে রেন্ট দিবে? তো এইগুলোকে দেখলাম যে এই সমস্যাগুলো আসলে প্রকট এবং আমাদের কিছু করা দরকার। এই থেকেই আর কি আমরা তাদের সাথে কাজ করি। তো ইস্টিয়ার 50 পরিবারকে যখন তারা এভিক্টেড কেস ফাইল করে, তখন তাদের হিয়ারিং এ যেতে হয়েছে সবাইকে। তো হিয়ারিংটা হলো কি আপনার অনলাইন হিয়ারিং হলো, যে আপনার অনলাইন হিয়ারিং এ আমরা টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন, এটা যদি পাবলিক হিয়ারিং ছিল, ভার্চুয়াল হিয়ারিং, সুতরাং আমরা সবাই অ্যাটেন্ড করতে পেরেছি। এবং আমরা প্রত্যেকটা হিয়ারিং ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল হিয়ারিং হয়েছে, এক এক দিনে হয়তো 2-4 জনের হয়েছে, এক এক দিনে একজনের হয়েছে, বাট আমরা পেরেছি তাদের সাথে সঙ্গ দিতে, তাদেরকে সাপোর্ট দিতে। আমাদের স্ট্রং সাপোর্টে এই 50টা পরিবারকে এভিকশন স্টপ করেছি। এবং আপনাকে বলতে চাই যে আমাদের ইস্টিয়ার 50 পরিবার একেবারেই এভিক্টেড হয়নি, তাদের এভিকশনটাকে আমরা স্টপ করেছি। এদিকে আমি আরেকটা জিনিস সুলতান আপাকে বলতে চাই, ডলিয়া পাও এখানে আছেন, যেটা হচ্ছে যে আমাদের টার্গেট ছিল কর্পোরেট ল্যান্ডলর্ডদের বিরুদ্ধে কথা বলা। আমাদের টার্গেট কিন্তু যারা স্মল হাউস, ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল হাউস ওনার যারা আছে, তাদের বিরুদ্ধে নয়। যারা কর্পোরেট ল্যান্ডলর্ড, যেমন প্রাইমডেল ল্যান্ডলর্ড, রানী ল্যান্ডলর্ড, প্রিন্স ল্যান্ডলর্ড, তারা ইচ্ছা করলেই কিন্তু আমাদের সাথে একটু নেগোশিয়েট করতে পারতেন, কিন্তু তারা করেননি। আমাদের লড়াই কিন্তু কর্পোরেট ল্যান্ডলর্ডদের জন্য, ক্ষুদ্র যারা হাউস ওনার তাদের জন্য না। আরেকটা পয়েন্ট আমি অ্যাড করতে চাই, আমাদের এটাও একটা দাবি ছিল গভর্নমেন্টের কাছে, যে আমাদের ল্যান্ডলর্ড এবং ক্ষুদ্র যারা হাউস ওনার ল্যান্ডলর্ড, তাদেরকে গভর্নমেন্ট যেন সাবসিডি দেয়। এই সাবসিডির কারণেই তাদের টেনেন্ট যারা আছে তারাও যেন সুবিধাটা পায়। আমাদের এটাও গভর্নমেন্টের কাছে আমাদের দাবি ছিল। এবার যেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা তো স্টপ করেছি, আমাদের টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন সবাই মিলে আমরা এভিকশন স্টপ করেছি। এবং আপনাদের গ্যাদারতে বলছি যে আমাদের কেউই এভিক্টেড নয়, আমরা এভিকশন মুক্ত করেছি আমাদের প্রতিবেশীকে, আমাদের নেইবারহুডকে। আমরা চালিয়ে যাব আমাদের সংগ্রাম। আমরা আশা করছি আমাদের টেনেন্ট ইউনিয়ন স্ট্রং ইউনিয়ন, এবং এখন আমার কাছে মনে হচ্ছে যে I'm really happy to be part of Tenant Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Dil Begum. Before Sabana start, I just want to say that she was talking about 50 family of the Eastern, Crescent Town, Tisdale and Pharmacy, and Guru Park was get a notice to be evicted. So Then all the tenant union board come together and they attend the hearing, and right now they are successfully stop this eviction order. So this is the people's power, that when the people come together, definitely there will be a win. And they are fighting against the corporate owner, not the small landlord, those who are also survive through the tenant money. But another thing is also they said in here that how people are suffering by that inhuman treatment of the corporate landlord. Like they don't renovate the house, they are not renovate anything, and they're putting kind of pressure. The old tenant should has to be leave, so the new tenant can come, so then they can increase the rent. So like same apartment is, one is 1200, another one is 1900. So because of that, they get the new people are getting more rent, and these are very funny things. Like I'm living in the same apartment, same things, but I'm paying more rent. So like this kind of law I never see in any country in the world. So like how come it's in Canada they're practicing this kind of for-profit business? And looks like they'll also mention that the people are so greedy right now, the profit, they don't have any social love. That is the important things we need in the COVID pandemic time, that everybody should love each other, everybody should consider. So this is a systemic inequality. It was before in the COVID-19. Now it's revealed. It shows up that we are living in a very unequal society. City inside city. There is one city that is for the rich people, another city that could be called white and pink city, and there is another city, brown city, inside where the racialized people live, doesn't have Canadian standard life. So I'm going to ask Shabana, please continue, and then we're going to go Dolly and Rima. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sultana Appa. Actually, I would like to talk about organizing. Organizing a tenant union is not easy. See, we all are working class people, all are busy in their daily life, all are busy in the daily bread earning. So when we decided, this was in the month of March when COVID started, like, when we decided that, okay, we have to come together, this was, as Dil said, like, this is not just because of the COVID that the tenant union has come into. It was all the frustration that was collected against the landlord with all these years, like, the inhuman conditions that we were living in, the attitude of the landlords towards the immigrant people, this immigrant people who had language issues could not communicate with the landlord. And this was the main thing, that they used to look down upon the people. So all this forced us to form a union. When we thought of making a union, what we started was we started talking to the neighbors. We did the door knocking. It's not an easy process, going to the door to door and talking to people, explaining them what we are aiming at. We are trying to fight against a corporate landlord who has big backing of money, the big lawyers. This is what we were trying to find out. We did tabling in the lobbies. We did supply of PPE kits. We did make all this arrangement. We cleaned our own building, which the landlords, it's a job of the landlord to clean the building when it's COVID all around. So this is what we did for our own people. When we did all these things, what we were faced with harassment from the landlord. Our property manager, Isabella, she went with throughout the building with a debit machine, asking people to pay the rent using their credit card. This is what we did not expect. Like, we did not want to accept this. We cannot let our people fall into the credit trap by paying the rent. When our Duckford is telling us have food first and then pay the rent. This is what actually we were faced with. Finally, when we went to politicians, Rima was with us. We know who was with us and who was not with us. Rima was always there to support us. They always wrote letters to Pindale, asking them to come to the table and discuss things with us. These corporate landlords are so big that they didn't even respond to the elected officials. Forget about the people. Forget about an individual people. Think about it, how they are going to react to an individual person when they are talking to the landlord. So we decided that coming together and fighting together as a group is the only way left to tackle this big landlords. We came together, and today we are reaping the fruits of coming together. This is what we are seeing in the LTB hearings, like, this is what is the power of people coming together. If we are not together today, the 50 people, if the union was not there, all these 50 people will be on the road. Being a good citizen of the country, we cannot see a person dying on the road if there is an accident. At least to me, I will not turn a blind eye when a person is dying at the road. I'll do whatever is possible on my side to see that the person is not here. At the LTB, the same thing is happening. If we don't fight together, that person is eventually going to die when he is on the road in the winter, in the global pandemic. The union, all those people who are watching us today, if you are not united, these landlords are going to take advantage of you. Come together, force the government to form some kind of laws which will enable them to control these landlords, which will enable them to form some kind of regulations on this landlord about the rent, the living conditions, everything. We are paying rent, so we deserve something in return of that rent. It's not just the 4 units full of bugs, full of roaches, full of bed bugs, all the repair issues. This is not as expected from what rent, that hard-earned money that we are paying against the rent. We are reaping the fruits of coming together as a union, and I expect and I hope that people in the city who are facing in the similar situation come together and form a union. We are here to support you. If you need any kind of information about coming together, if you need any help, we are always there to support you. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing very quickly in regards to reaping the fruits of our labor? Recently, as Dilapa and Shabana were talking about, we had nearly 50 hearings. Actually, we had more than 50 hearings because there's some tenants who were not able to be organized, and we found out about them and we went and rushed to their units. Like, we bought 15 minutes, which was really hard to buy from these adjudicators, and we defended them last minute. I think ultimately what was really evident through these LTB hearings is that if you're an organized tenant, you have a better chance of being protected. However, the LTB is bankrupt. I mean, Rima, you're going to probably speak to this. Being a witness in those hearings, you saw that they're not even willing to listen to politicians, right? And I think it's really important to identify who hired these adjudicators. Doug Ford has appointed these political appointees that were previous landlords, previous RCMP officers. So they're already morally bankrupt, and they're not going to be in support of tenants. They're biased. They're not going to have an impartial opinion about these hearings. So I think that it's very clear who's on our side and who's not. So we have fought this war in the LTB, but ultimately this is a fight that we're going to continue in our neighborhoods until we get what we want. And we have stalled hearings, we've withdrawn hearings, we've adjourned them, but no COVID evictions. Unfortunately, it's still not happening, right? Queen's Park has been shut down, but we're still here. We're still ready to go. I'm so happy I'm working with my aunties, and we're gonna keep going.
Thank you, Shabana Mullah. I just want to say it in here, we need policy, because as many times we are suffering, we cannot get support until government is not giving us the support. If government is supporting the corporate people, then we are suffering. So they are not playing a referee part in here. They should be the referee between the working class people and the corporation, but the government is not doing the proper job. That's why the inequality in the society. Only 1% people are holding 90% of wealth, and 90% people are giving more tax than 1% people. This is a very inhuman. We run the government by our tax money, but government is working for the rich people because they have power. So like, only one way people can make power if working class get organized together. SAWRO has been doing this work for last 10 years to making the working class come together and fight for their right. We are fighting for the worker right. We're fighting for the housing. We're fighting for the everything in our life. For a bread, for a butter, everything we need to fight. But we should not fight, because there should be a very nice, wonderful system that help us to come out from this thing. So I'm going to request Dolly to say us what kind of fight you do in the parliament to bring the people's right over there.
I would like to add one point.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. When we want the policies to be formed, it's not we alone who can make the government work and form them. All of those who are sitting in the panel, with all your support and with all the backing that you guys have, SAWRO has so many members, like, if you get those members together with us, we can go to Queen's Park, we can demand all these things. It's only the power is in the numbers. If we have the numbers, we can make government make the policy. It is the power. We have seen the freedom struggles in our country. It's because of the numbers that we have got the change in the world. Any change in the world can come only with the numbers. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Thank you. And also SAWRO is fighting for this housing issue last 2 years. Last years, we bring almost 300 tenants from our 10 and 20 digital building to fight against this rent increase. But in the COVID-19 times, we also send lots of, letter to the, landlord and also letter to the tenant to stop the eviction. And we will go to work continue like this. So let's hear from Dolly and Rima. Okay, Dolly, can you please start?
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you, Shabana Auntie and Dilapa and all of you. Actually, so let me just, you've set out the context really well for what's happening right now, and so I'll go into the policy piece a little bit later. And it's always wonderful to join with my sister, my neighbor colleague from Beaches this year. Just to be clear, we have, and actually SAWRO and I work really well together in Scarborough Southwest because our border is actually on Victoria Park. So for those of you listening, if you're on the east side of Victoria Park, going until Markham Road, and that includes tenants like those in Barnhill, for example, those on Kingston Road, those on Worden, Pharmacy, Teesdale, all of those. So we've been working very well together with a lot of tenants that have reached out to our office as well. And actually in March, this was something that we found out about from Teesdale tenants. So it was actually something that we heard was happening with some of the landlords, what they were doing at the Beaches East York area. And I know that Rima wrote a beautiful letter to the landlords themselves. And I think that really, it really showed some of the strength we have in numbers. And I know that a lot of the folks who have been struggling you have to come back and understand there's a lot of racialized people who don't normally want to speak up. And I know when I was there in the summer with the People Defense and the Tenants Union from Teesdale, we were talking on megaphone, asking people to come down the building, but a lot of people feel scared coming down because they don't want to expose themselves. And এটা আসলে আমি বাংলায় বলি আমাদের বাংলাদেশি কমিউনিটির অথবা সাউথ এশিয়ান কমিউনিটির সবাই একটু ভয় পায় because আমরা চাই না যে আমরা নিজেকে expose করি, maybe there will be reprimand, there will be some punishment for it. And that I understand there's a lot of fear because you don't want to lose your home. But what Shabana Appa was saying, it's so important that we unite and we fight together. And even though I'm not a member of the Beaches East York team, but we have been allies, and I think that's the same thing with SAWRO as well. The way we have worked together is really, really powerful. What we have tried to do is basically stand up for community members in the Scarborough Southwest area, but also in other Scarborough ridings. So unfortunately, in Scarborough Center, we have a PCMPP, and in Scarborough North, for example. So we have a PCMPP as well. And we actually got tenants from those areas who reached out to us, telling us what was happening to them. Unfortunately, especially above Eglinton, that area is another community that's very marginalized and has a lot of members who felt the exact same as what you were dealing with in Beaches East York. And the reason I wanted to put those contexts is because we, as all of us in the opposition, Rima, myself, and recently Suze Morrison, who actually got her motion passed, a unanimous consent motion passed about the no COVID eviction, which I think was a huge victory for all of us. And then the parliament shut down. The government decided to shut down parliament so they don't have to take action. And this is the type of government we're dealing with. In the middle of debate, they will shut down. In the middle of the week, they will shut down unless they want to pass something like Bill 184, which they did, expediting, and they will have night sessions after night sessions because they want to pass something. And we have seen this with the Doug Ford government. And to be honest, the previous government made it really easy for this government to do what they were doing. They made it really easy when they took away supports that Tenant had, for example. We know the above guideline rent increase, what's happening with folks in Tenant, in Teesdale area, for example, when they have to pay because management fixed a balcony and now everyone has to pay for that. I mean, how much did that balcony cost and how much are you actually paying? And for how many years? It is, the calculation does not make sense, and there is that unfair cost of it. I think, and I'll go into a little bit in terms of some of the work that we have done in Parliament, which is, one was to definitely raise all your concerns and take them to the government, whether it was the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, or it was to the Premier, and we have written to the landlords as well. And the other thing I found really useful was when I met with or talked to people, either with Zoom calls or through social media like this, in Bengali and in English, because we found that people were finally finding information. And I just want to salute to SAWRO and People's Defense and all those tenants unions, because you have given people information and the ability to understand that they don't have to fear to stand up for their rights. And that's one thing sometimes, even for us politicians, when we have the strength in numbers, when we have enough people supporting us, we're able to do that much better. Because we know from our community, with our office, we have 4 staff, but when we have community organizations that are organizing with local people, then you can spread the information about what kind of rights they have to stand up for. And what I found really useful actually was, another thing that was really useful was that we had individual landlords who actually did listen. So, and actually I remember what Dilapa was saying, and to all of you who's listening on live, for example, this fight was never against individual small landlords. And I spoke about this in Bangla in March and April and May, June, many times. I've talked to small landlords as well, and I will say it again. We stand with you, we support you, and one of our main demands with the Ontario NDP was support tenants, but support small landlords and those who have mortgages, for example. People, if it's their dream home and they're sharing that cost, support those people so that the tenants can have a roof on their on top of their head, as well as the landlords. Because we know in our community, especially those new immigrants, one day we hope, and we hope that that dream will come true as well. So all of that was part of that plan. And obviously, when we see a government that doesn't understand how this all plays a role in keeping our economy stable, keeping us giving us the ability to stand up after COVID, I think that's what comes back to what Sultana Auntie was talking about in terms of the equity piece and what we're facing in Scarborough Southwest or Beaches District and the community we have. It's the racialized, the marginalized communities, the low-income communities that have to face this kind of fight versus, you know, the other areas of the province. So I'll stop here and hand over to my sister, Rima Burns-McGowan.
I just want to say something before Rima started. One thing is, just now I got a call that said that one person has a very critical health condition. They got a cesarean baby, so she cannot move. So there was a appointment in the building in her apartment to fix the fire alarm. So because she cannot walk, and she said that, can you come later? The maintenance listened, but next day the superintendent called and said, okay, you have $50 fine for these things. So these are the things every single time we listen, and then we have to go to the landlord. Then, like tomorrow, I'm going to go to the landlord and confront her. So this is not the policy. You are not getting out of the policy. You cannot do these things, and then they will do it, stop it. It's happened several times. And several times I have to go to the landlord and talk with them and show them firmly that you are out of boundary, you are outlaw, you are not following the law. So this is our day-to-day struggle in Canada, in Teasdale, all the high-rise building. So sorry, Rima, I cut out, because I just want to say these things, because these are the issues we deal with every time.
Thank you. Thank you, sister. Those things are so important to hear. Thank you to everybody. So I think that what everybody has done is to really lay out what is going on and why is it happening. So I'm going to try to add a few things, but not to repeat what other people have said. So I think it's really important to just historically to hear that indeed, when this all started in March, when the shutdown started, Doug Ford was very clear. He said, if you have to choose between putting food on the table, paying for medications, your cell phone bill, whatever, please put food on the table, don't pay rent. And he also said to landlords, work it out, be kind, work it out. And then of course, and then he had this, the ban on evictions in the beginning. And I think what happened behind the scenes was that he got a lot of pushback from landlords. And it's not the mom and pop landlords who were pushing back. Again, our quarrel is not with mom and pop landlords. It was the big corporate landlords who are absolutely, and I think that the mining analogy is a perfect one. They are mining housing for profits. And there are all kinds of government policies that have enabled their doing that, including this idea that if you, of the vacancy decontrol, so between rentals, you can jack the rent as much as you want. And that is exactly the problem that you all identified, and that is exactly right. So the first thing that happened was that the eviction ban ended at the beginning of August. And then Bill 184, which had been introduced way back before COVID, anybody even knew about COVID, they actually made it worse. After listening to people talking about the way that they were afraid of evictions and the way that rent evictions were working, they made it worse with this clause that if you negotiate a deal with your landlord, then the landlord doesn't have to go back to the landlord tenant board, and they can just get you evicted like this, as you've heard. The terrifying thing, I have been sitting in the hearings along with the East York 50. And in order to get to the cases that the East York 50 were defending, I've been listening to these blocks of evictions, and it's been absolutely terrifying. And just to make the point that everybody has been making, it has been terrifying to listen to the way that the LTB is it is absolutely broken, and it is biased in favor of these corporate landlords. So if a corporate landlord doesn't come to a hearing, they will throw it out. But if a tenant doesn't come, the tenant can be evicted in under a minute. And the terrifying piece here is that it is not always clear whether the tenant even received the notice. I was listening to one hearing in which the East York 50 lawyer, who's absolutely brilliant, by the way, Seema Atri and her colleagues, she was saying, you know, how exactly did the tenant did not receive the eviction notice. And this famous or infamous Isabella Garcia tried to say that she'd pushed it under the door. And they went and got a photograph of the door to show that it is actually physically impossible to push something under the door. So then she tried to say, well, maybe she didn't put it under the door, maybe she put it in the handle. But we all know what these buildings are like. There's a kind of a wind in the hallway. People knock it as they go by. There is no proof that anybody actually received it. But if the lawyer hadn't been there to argue this through, she would have been evicted. And I saw this happening in so many other cases where people did not have the tenants union and the full legal defense behind. We saw so many other horrible cases. I saw one case with somebody who was not initially a member of the tenants union, where the mom did not speak English. This was in Goodwood Park. The mom did not speak English, and so they were negotiating with a child who wasn't even 18. And the child was clearly terrified because she was now about to legally commit her mother to something that could have got her evicted. And so fortunately, the tenants union members were on the call and they were able to convince the adjudicator to adjourn it. And that woman is now joining the tenants union. And the bottom line for me, again, one of the reasons that I was there as a witness is because the Bill 184 demands that there be meaningful negotiations between the landlord and the tenant. Meaningful negotiation is not the landlord threatening you with eviction if you don't sign this piece of paper that is an agreement that is too much money for you to manage. That is not a meaningful negotiation. And the power imbalance that Jasleen was talking about is very real. So the landlord has all the power, the tenants have very little power, especially if they're afraid of losing their housing, especially if they've got precarious employment, especially if they perhaps don't speak English and they're not sure of what their rights are. So that the landlord has all this power, and it's very easy for them to bully tenants into signing an agreement that they're afraid they won't be able to keep. Let me give you another example. I watched a tenant being bullied into an agreement. The adjudicator said, "Are you certain that you will be able to pay for this?" The tenant was a hairstylist who had lost his job because of COVID. And so what he was being evicted for was his arrears, the money that he owed when he couldn't afford to pay rent. He was now busy doing everything he could to pay his rent, but he was being evicted for those arrears. And he agreed to this agreement that the landlord wanted him to agree to. And the adjudicator in that case actually said, "Are you certain that you can afford to pay this? You've just lost your job again. How do you know? And if you are a day late or $1 short, you can be evicted without coming back here." But still, the man was terrified and ended up signing an agreement. This is the kind of horrifying thing that's happening over and over again. The only people who I have watched being safe were people who were members of the tenants union. So the point that I want to make here is, as my sisters were saying earlier, I have actually watched people being afraid to come down out of the buildings, to join the rallies, to join the tenants union, to stand up to these bully landlords. But the only way that you will be safe is if you do that, partly because of the defense that they will mount for you at the landlord tenant board. And in fact, the one time that we were able to go through with that defense, and I was there as a witness to show that there had not been meaningful negotiations. I could show because I had participated in asking for sending letters to the landlords, asking them to negotiate meaningfully. I know that they did not. And so we were able to, that was part of that defense. SEMA mounted this 3-hour defense of the tenant, a man who has a family and who was on the verge of being evicted despite the fact that he had health issues that came from COVID, that he was working with everything to repay, but they weren't going to give him an agreement that he could manage. The defense was so strong that the adjudicator really listened, and he said, "You know what, I'm going to go away and think about it. I think there's a very good chance that he will come back in defense of the tenant." But the point I want to make is, it is so important to have that powerful defense of the tenants union and everything that they can bring. So don't be afraid. Join a tenants union. The other piece in terms of the policy that Sister Sultana is talking about, and that is so important, and that my sister Dolly has been talking about, is that obviously we are in the opposition. All we can do is raise these issues very loudly and embarrass the government and embarrass them in the media. We've been doing that. You will see there was a very big piece on Beach Metro News online on this issue. It's been on the radio, it's been in the it's starting to really mount. That is the reason that, as Dolly mentioned, the government felt that it was forced to do the unanimous consent to agree to Suze Morrison's motion that there should be no COVID evictions. But what is the point of agreeing to it and then not acting on it? They could actually have acted on it that very same afternoon. They chose not to. They could act on it tomorrow. They are choosing not to. And so it's important to understand this is classic what this government does. It will say whatever it needs to in order to avoid the public pressure, but it will not take the action. And the only way, there's two things. Number one, next time around, Dolly and I and other members of the NDP need to become government, because then we can actually make these policy changes that you all have been talking about and that Sister Sultana has been talking about and that we need to implement. But in the meantime, we need bigger numbers. We need more people joining tenants unions, talking to SAWRO and making sure they know their rights, going out and protesting very loudly in the streets, talking to the media, forcing public to pay attention so that this can't get swept under the rug, and so that they are forced to put in place an evictions ban, forced to actually give rent relief to small landlords and force big corporate landlords to take that hit and make sure that they keep people housed. And I'll stop here and happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Very wonderful, fiery speeches. That's great. I just want to see that if Dolly and Rima and the NDP are making government, can they promise to us on front of the people that they will make lots of social house, community house, rather than
Absolutely.
the real estate people are making their for-profit corporation business? Can you guys do these things?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, we will. And we're promising right now, and you will hold us to account. We will make it happen right away.
And through this, live, I just want to tell everyone, please, if the landlord come to you to sign something, please do not sign. Please contact with us. Let us intervene, and then we can see what you sign. Do not sign any paper with the landlord, and wait until that we have a discussion, so that our legal people, the SAWRO, can see that what you are signing, and other can see what you are signing. And yeah, if you want to join the union, please contact with us. We can help you to connect it with them. So I just want to, there is some question is coming. One question that is the question, someone raised it. 1 second, please. The question is, okay. This request for Dolly and Rima, that I like to request Dolly and Rima to inform about, as they arised the issue at Parliament, what they expect from provincial government in this regard.
So I'm going to guess we're talking about what happened with Bill 184, as well as the no COVID eviction motion, and what we can expect from the government, because there's quite a few things that we cannot expect. And let's be very, very clear, with this government, we cannot expect them, and we are not very hopeful in the fact that they're going to make it any easier for tenants. Doug Ford will not make it easier for tenants. He's not going to repeal Bill 184, and he's not going to help tenants get through this time with any subsidies. We have been asking for that even before COVID started, because we knew that this housing crisis was there before COVID. there was the problem with what the wait list looks like for housing connections. The amount of years you have to wait is almost 15, 20 years. I have people in my office who most likely will die before they get housing. People who have been on the wait list for 12, 13 years, in their 60s, 70s, with terminal illnesses, for example, who are supposed to be on the priority list. And yet they're told that after 10, 12 years, they'll be hoping to get housing. And that is just unacceptable. That's the reality that we're facing right now in the city. And that's what we see with this government and the way the housing connection list has grown. I got an update just in the last few days from Housing Connection with the number of people that are on the list and the number of years, and it's just absolutely horrendous. The other thing I think we can expect from this government is for some things to go even worse with the ability of landlords, and especially with this eviction factory, as I think many of us are calling it, this eviction factory that's been created with the landlord and tenant board. If you'll recall, last year, around this time, we had tenants who were going through a really difficult time trying to get hearing, trying to get justice, because they were waiting for landlords to do things, to fix things, because there was unjust, there was a lot of, things like mold, things that were happening in their apartments, and they were waiting for hearings, for example. We had landlords that were waiting as well. That time, we heard, Doug Downey, the Attorney General, tell us that, hold on, we have to wait to get a process and have adjudicators. And guess what happens now? Now we have all these adjudicators who are making it easy for people to be evicted. So with this government, you can expect for them to make decisions as it serves their friends, as it serves big landlords and big developers, because that's the way it helps them be re-elected or get the funding they need for their elections. Because essentially that's who they are. These are the people who paid. These are the big developers that we're seeing right now on Kingston Road, for example, or across the city, who are building big buildings and trying to do demo evictions, which is another thing that we can have another big conversation about. These are the people who elected this government and paid for their elections. So it all comes down to this big circle of how who are the real friends of Doug Ford and who are actually getting the benefits when it comes to this kind of whether it's the evictions that are taking place, or whether bills like Bill 184 is being passed. And I know Rima wants to say something as well.
Yeah, and I think that, I agree with absolutely everything that Dolly has said, and it's really important to understand what the bottom line is for this government. I also think that where there is some hope to push back is that, because when people get evicted, they're often not going to be able to go into another apartment. They're going to many will end up homeless. And we have a homelessness emergency. There's literally nowhere for people to go. Shelters are full. Everything is full. Everything is full. It was full before COVID. It's doubly full now. There are encampments. There's nowhere for people to go. So where you'll start to, I think, to have a possibility of a larger coalition of people pushing back at Ford is that all the people in the city who don't want encampments on their front lawns, but understand that there's nowhere to go, when that system starts to swell even further because of the evictions, you will start to see a coalition of other homeowners who are stepping up and saying this has to stop. One of the ways you deal with homelessness is that you keep people housed in the first place, and you'll start to see the backlash. And when Ford believes that his popularity is being affected, his political popularity, that's when there's room to push him to backtrack on some of these policies. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a brutal fight. It's not going to happen unless we all pull together.
Thank you, Rima. I want to hear from Faria. Faria was organizing people for other place also. And I want to hear from you that there is a assumption that this South Asian multi-generational house, a crowded community, and that's why they have a more COVID case. Like the blame is coming from one of the MP from Brampton. So I just want to ask you, Fariha, what is your experience about that kind of situation to other place, because you are working in the west side a lot?
Thank you, Sultana. It's a concern, and I also read in the newspapers articles written by the people of our community, and there was a lot of misunderstanding on the information that was provided. And I think earlier speakers also mentioned, and you mentioned too, how the COVID has a color and why is it affecting, and how this whole perception of South Asians or the brown and black communities are affected. So what we hear from our work is that we work mainly with the low-income South Asians, and we definitely understand it's our clientele is all of them are vulnerable low-income people, and we see their day-to-day challenges, and COVID has added on top of that. And if they are in a situation like this, of course, they're new immigrants, they have challenges in terms of employment, in terms of languages, in finding jobs. And we also see the poverty that the people are affected is it's a cycle, right? And if your education is affected, then their family, the family ties are affected, then the mental health issues come in. So it's a cycle of vicious cycle that you're caught in. So so the challenges goes from one to another. In terms of the eviction, rather how the COVID-19 is affecting, definitely it is hard on the South Asians. And I would definitely agree with the speakers who spoke earlier. It is also due to the systemic way how the structures have been in place. And that is why it's just so challenging for us to get out of it. And so we need these political changes, we need systemic changes, the structures to be changed and the support to be provided so that people not only get out of one challenge, they can progressively get out of their challenges and get into a better life. And just before I conclude, just something else that I wanted to comment was about another unfortunate provision of the Bill 184, is that in terms of rent increase. So that is also prior to the bill, if people have to follow, there is a rent increase guideline. So every year the province regulates it. For 2020, it was 2.2%. So that's the amount of legally allowable increase for the rent. But what happens with Bill 184 is it allows illegal rent to be deemed legal if the tenant does not challenge it within 12 months of the increase. So it's again very unfortunate situation for the tenants. So you have to know, if you get a rent increase notice, you make sure that it is within that percentage, the allowable provinces guide within the guidelines. If not, you have to challenge it, or else it's going to be deemed legal. So that's something that I want to point out. Thank you.
So just quickly, I'd like to jump in and kind of add to what Fariha's been saying. So that second point is really important. It's important to note that as with this most recent introduction, this provision that says you have 12 months to challenge an illegal rent increase, there's usually a limitation to anything. So often one of the big failings, in my opinion, of something like the Residential Tenancies Act and the approach to housing in Ontario is that when something is done that constitutes sort of an injury or some kind of an illegal act, it's made legal simply by time, which is not something that should be the case. There should always be a remedy available. That's just unfortunately not the way that it works. There's always a limitation. So one thing that I'm really appreciating just from the panel today is that obviously, as Rima mentioned, rightfully, there's various levels of advocacy that are represented here, and both the strengths and the weaknesses of those levels is like well highlighted in the way that we're able to describe the work that we do. A tenants union is, I think, in so many ways, one of the most powerful kind of structures that can be that can essentially capitalize on the ways in which we can come together, on what community means to us, and ultimately in the ways that the law should exist, which is really peripheral to our lives as opposed to central and governing and gate kept. When you have lawyers like myself, like Faria, we actually should be made defunct if we can make communities successful and functional enough. So in the context of the Landlord and Tenant Board, I think that when we think about advocacy, when we think about our rights, I really encourage people to know what those are. And so I often guide them to a clinic, for example. But when there's a social kind of union, that's generally the place that you want to be. That's generally the kind of all around poultice to an ache until that ache can be resolved. So I'm really glad to hear from People's Defense, especially today, because I think that there are a lot of very recent examples in which they've demonstrated their might. Also, recent examples in which they've demonstrated what it really means to be a self-represented litigant in a system that hopes to kind of fracture us and ensure that none of us are really well educated on our rights unless we've paid $150,000 and gone through a formal institution, right? And then taught us how to uphold the same laws that are actually keeping us down. So, so it's really good to hear from you folks. I do very quickly want to say, because I know that this time is coming near to an end, there are other things other than Bill 184 that have changed in the last year. Some of these are actually incredibly injurious. So some of them have been introduced and they obviously benefit one segment of society, and generally it's the corporations. One of those is a rent freeze in 2021. The reason that I mentioned this, so one is the rent freeze in 2021, and then the other thing, because I think that these are things now that we have the platform, we should just discuss them very quickly, is the change in the way that rent controls work. So previously, all apartments were subject to the rent guideline increase, the RGI, but unfortunately, because the Ford government wants to ensure that landlords are essentially able to govern themselves, especially new builds. Anybody after a certain period of time, I believe it's November 2018, anyone who's moving into an apartment that's never been used as a residential unit under the RTA prior to that date, they're actually not controlled by rent in the same way. So during 2021, there will be a rent freeze. That rent freeze does have exceptions. One of those exceptions, unfortunately, is for people who agreed to a rent increase in 2021. In 2020, you won't be protected. Kind of on a positive note, if you are living in a rent geared to income building, if you're low income for 2021, often your rent is tied to your income. And if your income goes up, it doesn't really matter that you have slightly more disposable income because your rent goes up too. But for 2021, if you experience an increase in your income, you may be protected by the rent freeze. So I know we're talking specifically about Bill 184, but Hamna made a really good point at the top of this meeting, which is that Bill 184 wasn't the beginning, nor will it be the end of the ways in which the law is manipulated and wielded as a sword against the vulnerable and the people who are least likely to be able to defend themselves when they're on their own, right? So I think if there are any questions, even beyond this point and outside of this meeting, about kind of questionable practices, your rent's been increased, locks have been changed, repairs have been done, and the bill has been handed to you, it's always a better idea to ask a question and get independent legal advice, or to talk to your tenants union before you act or sign anything. So I know it's a bit longer winded than I even expected to go, but I really think there's a lot changing, especially during a pandemic. And we've really, like, I can't emphasize enough, so important to try to stay on top of it, or to talk to somebody who knows kind of what's going on.
If I may just comment very quickly about something I believe Jasleen was pointing it out, and so was Faria, around like the kind of issues that can be raised regarding Bill 184 in the court. I think just yesterday I was at a hearing where a tenant who was unable to communicate because of a language barrier and has a kid with Down syndrome and is struggling to pay their rent because of the special diet they need for their child. The adjudicator completely muted him when it came to the interim order, and because they were not fully being defended, it was really hard to speak up for yourself. So I think that there's a lot of those issues, and we're hearing things that, you know, for example, in Teesdale, I think that there's a lot of issues in that neighborhood around harassment, which makes it really harder for the tenants to come out and organize. But I do think that one thing that we should consider is, in the past year, like, I grew up in this neighborhood in Crescent Town, and I've never seen uncles and aunties ever come together and fight landlords, fight their bosses. Because when we come to this country, we're taught to keep our heads down, right? We're supposed to be that docile immigrant that, like, you know, you never knew the history of struggle, when we actually come from that, as Shabana Auntie was saying. So our parents, our uncles, aunties, our brothers and sisters are taught to forget that. I think that this fight reminds us that there is no such thing as a docile immigrant. There's just an immigrant that's been taught to, you know, feel like, you know, you have to stay oppressed. And we're no longer putting up with that, and we're going to continue fighting. And I think that's why the policy issue, like around even what we were talking about, Suze Morrison's motion, I think it's unfortunate, right? Like, that Queen's Park was shut down, but at the same time, how long are we going to wait? Like, it's not going to be opened up till Feb, and people are still going to be facing eviction in this eviction factory. So we have to do what we do best, which is to continue defending ourselves, because right now there's 300 hearings a day. And those are going on. These people don't even care about the holidays. They're willing to not just evict people in the holidays, they're running hearings in the holidays. And John Tory sits with his buddies. Doug Ford, you know, he's in the pockets of these landlords. There's very little people on our side, but who we do have on our side is our neighbors, shoulder to shoulder. We're standing next to each other. We can't wait for a policy. It's too late for, like, waiting for better days to come ahead around, like, this form of governance. We have to create our own power, and I think that's ultimately what, like, building a tenant union, and it's not beyond a tenant union, right? Like, it's about people's power in whatever capacity it comes in. Because there's one particular story, there was an unlawful eviction that took place in our neighborhood in 7 Crescent with an Ethiopian sister, you know, who was kicked out of her home by the sheriff. She had no understanding why that happened, because her case went back to a year and her hearing was not supposed to take place. She had paid the court fee and all of that, and the stay order for the sheriffs. But then the Toronto police came and evicted her from her apartment, and they have no jurisdiction doing that. And, you know, we're not just up against the sheriffs and the landlords, we're up against Toronto police, we're up against police brutality. Some of my neighbors were faced with police brutality while John Tory, like in front of John Tory's house, while John Tory was on an anti-police brutality phone call at that moment. So I think that it's interesting to see, like, what we're up against, but what's more interesting to see is that we're not going to back down. And I think that's really important, because if we're being used as, like, if small landlords are being used as human shields, we have to be each other's shields as tenants, and we have to defend ourselves. And I think that's really important, because 47% of the city is renters, right? That's like nearly half the city. And this issue concerns most of the working class racialized people in the city.
Just because we are together, we were able to defend eviction also. We have fought against the eviction. We have sent police. We have sent the police and the sheriff back. We have not allowed our sister to be evicted. This particular sister who was evicted got back her apartment. This is what is the importance of the unity.
Yeah, and you know what the unfortunate thing is? I don't know, Rima, if we spoke to you about this yet, but basically, one person whose N4 was, you know, considered null and void, they recently got another N4. Like, the judge decided that, you know what, this is wrong, this shouldn't be evicted, blah, blah, but guess what? Pineville Properties is sending another N4. They just sent it 2 days ago. And that goes to show that they're unwilling to negotiate. But we're going to be back fighting, and the fight is, and I think that's what's really important to understand, is that this fight shouldn't be at the LTB. Why should we be even dragged to the LTB in the first place in a global pandemic? And we should actually be able to negotiate with our landlords and get no COVID evictions and rent relief on the table outside of the court. Because, like, my aunties are getting, like, N4s again. But, you know, we're going to be back at it, and I know, Rima, you're going to be with us, so
and I think it makes a difference when I keep showing up, because I think they think I'm going to stop showing up, but I don't. I'm just like, keep being there.
Thank you for all these things. I have a lot of questions. I don't know how I'm going to ask it, and I know that the time is very short. I'm just asking 2 questions. Dolly,
I actually have another housing meeting that's to do with my writings development. So I have to get off the live, but I just wanted to say, you know, we're talking about Beaches East York, and I have been standing there as an ally. It's actually not my tenants who are in Beaches East York, it's Rima's tenants, who's been an amazing fighter for the tenants there and with all of you guys. But I'm an ally, and I think what we can do is actually push some of the other MPPs to do the exact same thing. Even though you know, Goodwood Park folks as well as Christentown are not my tenants or not my constituents, I want to stand up for them as well because of the organizing that we do. We have to get Vijay Thanigasalam, Christina Maitis, people like those across Scarborough, across the city who are part of the government as well, to be allies in this fight. Because if they stop standing up like sardines in the House and vote with the government, if they stop doing that, we can actually push this government to do some of the things, undo some of the damages they have made. And that's the only way we're gonna get some of the changes done. Obviously, the bigger fight is what Rima said before, is if we make government, which we have to make government to undo a lot of these things, and that fight starts right now. And that movement starts right now, because the way things are going, whether it's an attack on our land, our tenants, people, environment, all of it, and we cannot afford to continue. So as an ally, I'm so excited to join you today, and I will always be there. I will show up to Dentonia Park, even if it's not to do with Scarborough Southwest, but just to show solidarity. And obviously, I thank you all for the work that you do. To SAWRO, thank you always. It's wonderful to work with you. And I am so sorry for leaving you early, but I will catch up on the live and check in after. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Dolly. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I also have another obligation at 7:30, but I just want to say thank you so much. Salco, you're incredible. I don't know what we'd do without you. SAWRO, my heart, thank you. People's Defense, Tenants Union, let me know. I will always be there in every way I can.
Okay.
Okay.
We are going to run only for 5 more minutes. I just want to ask some question that I got it in here. One question for Salco, that someone said, should I contact a lawyer when I attend a LTB hearing? How can I arrange for a legal representative and translator immediately? I know that they should contact it with legal aid society, but do you have kind of anything to say that this purpose that they should follow?
Freya, if it's okay, I can quickly answer this. Okay, so if you are going into an LTV hearing, I would always suggest that you try to contact somebody, but what you should be aware of is that if you think that you qualified for Legal Aid Ontario does not provide certificates. Legal aid certificates are usually only provided for certain limited family or criminal matters. What instead you would qualify for is legal aid advice through a clinic. So if you're South Asian, you can contact us. If it's an emergency and you're not South Asian, you can contact us. There's the Advocacy Centre for Tenants in Ontario, ACTO, you can contact them, or you can contact your neighborhood legal clinic. If you belong to another minority group, depending on what it is, you can contact one of the other specialty clinics. All of this to say, if you reach out to us, we can walk you through where you need to go just to get that basic information to know where to go next. At this point, we're also able to refer you, for example, to People's Defense or to other organizations, depending on where you're involved. So it's not like we'll just look for lawyers or paralegals. So in short, if you think that you don't know what you're going into, if you just want the kind of basic guidance that'll tell you what you're up against, talk to a lawyer or a paralegal. If you contact a legal clinic, it'll be free. If you reach out to a private lawyer or a paralegal, you'll end up paying. So if you don't think that you're able to pay, just contact a clinic. The least you'll get is information. The most you'll get is representation for your issue. So they'll show up, they'll walk you through it. They'll try to get the best outcome. Often they'll try to resolve it before the hearing. At the very least, if your hearing is in 3 hours, there's tenant duty counsel. And they're usually available through the Advocacy Centre for Tenants in Ontario. So during the pandemic, to contact them, again, their information's online, and so I'm not able to post it right off the top of my head, but But the Tenant Duty Council basically will talk to you in the minutes before a hearing, and they're always available. So they're there as well. There's some limitations, but can't get into the nuance right now. I just want to keep it short and sweet for you guys.
I was also going to say, as Justine was pointing out, like all the different avenues, one of them being that like, if you rely on the duty council right now, another issue that's arising is that in my experience, I've seen the TDC offering people to take repayment plans, as well as, you know, just people not really knowing their rights. And besides the TDC or not, I think that be it like the rent bank option or any of the predatory repayment plans being put forward, or EPIC is one thing that these landlords keep pushing right now. It seems like it's a bit of a lobby group for them. They're basically like the landlords gatekeepers, the best way to put it, where they get to choose 800 families. There's tens of thousands of evictions happening, and there's only 800 families that qualify for this. So I think that like ultimately there's hundreds and thousands of families in these neighborhoods that are up for evictions, and we need to make sure that like those are not their only options. The rent bank, EPIC, or any of these repayment plans, anyone suggesting that is morally bankrupt. And the best way to sort of get in touch with people if you're struggling right now, I think like Keep Your Rent, People's Defense, finding progressive lawyers that are able to support you, because entering like the LTV without that level of support, it's like entering in a cave with like a bunch of tigers that are ready to attack you. And even when you're organized, we're getting muted, we're getting, you know, thrown out. Journalists are not even allowed to get on board. So I think that like get organized, and if you're not, then get in touch with your neighbors and make sure that you can defend yourself, because people's power is your ultimate defense.
Thank you everyone to joining this wonderful discussion, because we really wants to defend the situation right now, and also confronting the power that always grinding us down, not only for the housing, also employment, also all the things that create a poverty. Poverty is a systemic barrier, and we definitely need to fight to fix the system. And without the people power, we cannot fight for the system. So this is the vice versa. We need to work together. We need to find it out lots of winning tactics, how we can win these things, how we can bring the justice for the people. And all of you, thank you. The Dil Begum, Shabana Mullah, and Hamna, and Jaslin, Fariha Nazim, Aziz, and also, sorry, I say your name in a little bit wrong way. Sorry, and also like two of our political leaders, everyone, we need to come together. When we will come together, then we can defend our rights. Okay, so like we have to work together in future. Like let's see that how we can make a very strong platform to support each other, to make the justice for people. Thank you everyone to joining with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And the tenants united can never be defeated. So I mean, a lot of organizing power.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good morning. Bonjour à tous. This morning, it's my pleasure to join Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Fury, and my colleague, Minister Seamus O'Regan. Unfortunately, we can't be all together this morning. I know, Prime Minister, you are in Ottawa, and Premier and Seamus, you are in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Welcome to everyone watching. I know you're anxious to hear the Prime Minister. So with that, Prime Minister, allow me to virtually pass the microphone to you. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Bonjour à tous. Merci au ministre O'Regan et au Premier ministre Fury de se joindre à nous virtuellement. Last week, our government presented a new, strengthened climate plan, accelerating our work to build a sustainable future. This plan includes concrete measures, like making clean power available across the country, that will help Canada exceed its 2030 target. In October, the Canada Infrastructure Bank earmarked $2.5 billion for clean power. They're working with provincial and regional partners to connect Canadians to clean electricity, including through the Atlantic Loop. In our fall economic statement, we also committed $25 million to support clean power through local work like community engagement and engineering studies. Notre gouvernement a promis de dépasser les cibles annoncées à Paris il y a 5 ans et pour avancer dans cette direction, nous sommes déterminés à délaisser progressivement le charbon pour le remplacer par des sources d'énergie propres, dont l'hydroélectricité. Pour y arriver, nous continuons de collaborer avec les provinces et les territoires, incluant bien sûr Terre-Neuve et Labrador. C'est pourquoi, en février dernier, nous avons annoncé des négociations en vue d'une restructuration financière pour le projet de Muskrat Falls. Nous continuons de croire en son importance et aujourd'hui, nous avons une autre annonce à faire qui démontre que nous avançons dans ce dossier. Our government is committed to working with Newfoundland and Labrador to ensure that the ongoing Muskrat Falls project remains on stable financial footing. Advancing clean air electrification is the smart thing to do, not just for people in the Atlantic, but for all Canadians who will benefit from a cleaner environment. Today, I can announce that we've appointed Serge Dupont to oversee federal work on the financial restructuring of Muskrat Falls and to advise on the next steps to support the Atlantic Loop. As federal representative and senior executive advisor, Mr. Dupont will be responsible for coordinating efforts across government to create a lasting solution that's in the best interests of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and all Canadians. Federal and provincial officials have now completed the first phase of the restructuring process. The federal government has agreed to provide temporary debt relief to reduce immediate financial pressure on Newfoundland and Labrador. This is important progress, but there's more to be done. We need to keep working to ensure a sustainable long-term solution for Muskrat Falls and support both the Atlantic Loop and the broader electrification objectives in Newfoundland and Labrador. Mr. Dupont's appointment today, building on his strong leadership and proven record, is another step towards reaching these goals. Comme nous l'avons dit dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne, il faut continuer d'investir dans les infrastructures et les énergies propres afin de bâtir des communautés fortes et une économie plus résiliente pour tous les Canadiens. Muskrat Falls va fournir de l'électricité propre et fiable pour les gens de Terre-Neuve et Labrador et pour la région de l'Atlantique. To all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, I know it's been a tough year, but I also know that you've come together to help each other through these difficult times, as you always do. You remind us that even if things are hard, we're never in this alone. Our government will continue to do our part to support families and workers as we rebuild our economy. Clean energy initiatives not only fight climate change, they create good jobs and build a competitive economy that works for the middle class. Together, we will build a healthier and cleaner future for everyone. Thank you all so much, and I'm happy to pass it back to Minister Leblanc.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you for that exciting announcement. It's important to Canada, but as you noted, it's important to Newfoundland and Labrador. And that's why it's for me a privilege to turn the microphone now to Dr. Andrew Furey, the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you all for joining us here today. I know that the last 9 months have been strange and full of doubt for all of us. And while the pandemic and the COVID-19 vaccine have absolutely been top of mind, I've also been working hard on realizing a commitment that I made. It's a commitment that I've spoken of throughout the province because I know it's been on the minds of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Well, my friends, today I'm proud to say that we take a bold first step. Today we enter into negotiations with the federal government to help us right the direction of Muskrat Falls, the Lower Churchill, the Atlantic Loop, and the financial uncertainty that has been like an anchor on all of us. That weight is in addition to what we've all been through in 2020. Starting today, that changes. I want to thank my friend, a friend of Newfoundland and Labrador, and our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, for joining us and for taking the time to help further these negotiations, all with a vision for a clean, green Atlantic region. It's a strong testament of his commitment to the East Coast and what we know is his love for the people of our province. This is an example of how collaboration of how a federation, of how Canada should work. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you to my friend, Minister LeBlanc, for your tireless efforts and recognizing the importance of this complex issue for the province and indeed the region. Your continued efforts will allow for growing a green, clean, stable economy in the Atlantic region. And of course, thank you, Minister O'Regan. We are so grateful for your strong voice and advocacy for the people of this province at the national table. I'm personally thankful for your guidance and support, along with your fellow MPs. It's not my intention to sit here and review or criticize the decisions that were made in the past. That's been done and done again. I want to focus on this first push. I want to focus on the many hands on the stone before us and the momentum we can build as we move it forward together. Working with our partners in Ottawa, we will begin the push to set us on sound financial ground when it comes to Muskrat Falls, rate mitigation, and advancing our goals for the Atlantic Loop. Demonstrating Ottawa's commitment, they have again appointed Serge Dupont as a new federal special representative and lead negotiator as a counterpart to Brendan Paddock, who leads our own provincial rate mitigation team. Together, they will continue to advance this work through both levels of government. We are pleased to announce today that the focus has been directly on our biggest hurdles, reducing the immediate fiscal pressures on the province from the project. Federal and provincial governments have been completing work to provide significant interim support to Newfoundland and Labrador, reducing our cash requirements related to servicing the Lower Churchill's debt and other financial obligations. This means the province doesn't have to borrow $844 million in payments, almost all of which would have been required this month and added to our debt. This measure provides financial flexibility to complete this project and reduces the immediate requirement for significant funds and associated borrowing costs. It also demonstrates the restructuring process has begun in earnest and sets the stage for the next exciting phase of negotiations. This important next phase speaks to the future of the province and includes an agreement on the scope of financial restructuring and commitment to advance interests associated with the Atlantic Loop. We will start by redefining the financial structure of this project to ensure a financially stable, long-term solution. We will complete and implement a restructuring agreement by the time of commissioning. This may include federal participation in the capital structure, equity, and debt profile on the projects, and the potential monetization of assets, such as expected income from the Labrador Island Link. Second, we will together assess opportunities to support the Atlantic Loop and broader electrification objectives in Newfoundland and Labrador. And finally, we have agreed on a critical path forward, including key milestones and a robust governance structure. We will develop a draft term sheet by the spring and complete restructuring agreement by the project's commissioning. Today, with this first bold step, we start the new momentum. For all of us who have been worried about the issues surrounding Muskrat Falls and what it could bring to bear on the people of this province, I want you to know that we have heard you, we understand, and we have actively taken action here today to make a difference. Yes, there's much more work to be done, but working together with our partners in Ottawa, joint oversight will be the mandate. Putting Newfoundlanders and Labradorians at ease is the true goal through creating a stable, clean environment for families to grow, work, and play. But rest assured, there are many hands on this stone. It will move. It moved today, and it will keep moving. Thank you. I now welcome my friend, Minister O'Regan.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Prime Minister, for being here. It's important for people to know that the federal government recognizes the scale of the problem of Muskrat Falls and the impact it will have on our province. As MPs, we know it because our families, our friends, our neighbors remind us about this all the time. We watch the news every night. We're ratepayers too, and we're keenly aware of what is coming down the wire. That's why we're meeting those challenges head on. These negotiations will look at various options that are in the joint interests of both governments. And what is in the joint interests of both governments is a long-term, permanent solution. We said that we would be there to help, and we are. Because when we stay focused on common objectives, our governments are capable of getting the hard stuff done. We saw that last year in the renewed Atlantic Accord, which is an additional $2 billion over the next 10 years to the people of the province. We saw that this year in the $395 million invested to create jobs and lower emissions and make it more competitive on our offshore. We're seeing that today. We have to keep working together to deliver clarity, certainty, and predictability to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, because delivering certainty is how we will secure prosperity for our province. Today is a good day for ratepayers, a good day for Newfoundland and Labrador. Minister LeBlanc, back to you.
Well, thank you, Seamus, and it's also a good day for Canada. Canadians, as the Prime Minister noted, are very attached to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, and today's announcement shows what the Prime Minister has said over and over again, that our partnership with the government of Premier Fury is real, and we look forward to the work in the months ahead. So, Prime Minister, thank you for joining us this morning. Andrew and Seamus as well. I'm happy to be a small part of this very important day for Newfoundland and Labrador and Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Andrew. So good to see you. Thank you, Seamus, for all your hard work on this. All of you have a wonderful Christmas, and pass on all my very, very best, especially for a Happy New Year, which I think is everyone's priority, to all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Prime Minister, and thanks for your leadership on this COVID crisis. We're very lucky to have you at the helm.
Now, vaccines are good news for all of us, and we've all worked together. Thank you so much for everything you've done around the Council of Federation as well, Andrew, to make sure we're ready for this moment. Having an MD around the table has been a nice bonus for us all.
Well, thanks very much. Merry Christmas, guys. Merry Christmas, Dom.
Merry Christmas,
Thanks again.
all.
Merry Christmas, colleagues. Thanks again.
Bye.
We are still speeding in the wrong direction, and the world has also emitted more than 200. We are still speeding in the wrong direction, and the world has also emitted more than 200.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Nina Kressler, and I am President and CEO here at the Shaw Center, and I'd like to offer a very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of my staff and myself on this chilly December morning. So this year has been a year like no other, one that has been especially devastating to our business and our industry. 2020 was slated to have been one of the best years of operations for the Shaw Center since opening in 2011. Not only were we going to have a record-breaking number of conventions, it was also going to translate into generating the largest economic impact to date. In March, COVID-2019 pandemic hit and business came to a halt. As Minister MacLeod has often said, our industry was one of the first to be impacted and one of the last to recover. As we approach 2021, we will continue to look forward to the light at the end of the tunnel for a much, much brighter future. I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce someone who is certainly not a stranger to the Shaw Center. When she was here last, she had wrapped up a tour of Ontario and since then has not stopped meeting with and advocating for our industry. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our champion of tourism, the Honourable Lisa MacLeod, Ontario's Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. Minister MacLeod. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina, and to you and your amazing team, I want to wish you a very happy holiday season, and I hope that 2021 brings back the success that we know the Shaw Center has enjoyed over the years. As a Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, but also as a local Ottawa MPP, I've always been so proud of the Shaw Center. If these walls could talk. Some of our country's most respected political leaders have either won their leadership in these walls or in these halls. They've made significant contributions to public policy. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario often has their conventions here. So some of the things that we've seen grow throughout all of Ontario happened as a result of discussions at the Shaw Center. Industry also enjoys taking their business to the Shaw Center, and we've seen things like Go Media, and we have seen the film and television industry descend upon our great city, making some of the best business deals in the country. And a lot of philanthropy happens here. I'd be remiss not to point out that both last year and this year, under very different circumstances, the Shaw Center played home to Ottawa's own Christmas Cheer that gives back over $70,000 to local charitable organizations each and every year. This is an iconic institution, not only for the City of Ottawa, but for the entire province of Ontario, and I would venture to say our nation as well. Last year, in 2019, they were able to host over 44 major events, hosting over 63,000 visitors from outside of Ottawa, contributing to 1,600 jobs that amounted to over $76 million in labor income, contributing over $54 million in taxes to all three levels of government, and boosting the Ottawa and Eastern Ontario economy by $141 million. As a self-financing agency of my ministry, we rarely need to write a check because the Shaw Center has been so successful. But COVID-19 stripped the Shaw Center in the last year of many things, including 95% of its revenues. And that's why I'm here today, to announce that the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries not only values and believes in the Shaw Center, but we're going to make an unusual and one-time investment into the Shaw Center so that it can come back bigger and stronger post-COVID-19. Today, the Ontario government is announcing $3.8 million in stabilization funding so that when it is safe to do so, Ottawa will be able to welcome the world back to our province and make sure that some of the best business deals, some of the great political discussions, some of the public policy debates in our future will be again happening right here at this iconic institution. So to Nina, her staff, and to our board, I want to offer our government's commitment to ensuring that as we move forward, as outlined yesterday in the release of our white paper in the ministry, the Shaw Centre, along with our other agency, Metro Toronto Convention Centre, will be working together collaboratively to bring business travel, when it's safe to do so, back to this gateway city. I'm happy to take any questions.
We'll now go to questions on the phone line. Just a reminder, one question, one follow-up. First question, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, should you wish to ask a question, please press star followed by 1.
Is that James?
Appears there are no questions at this time.
Okay, well listen, Merry Christmas to everyone and Happy Holidays. I know we had media on the other end, so thank you very much. And please stay safe and look after yourselves.
Good morning. Bonjour à tous. This morning, it's my pleasure to join Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Fury, and my colleague, Minister Seamus O'Regan. Unfortunately, we can't be all together this morning. I know, Prime Minister, you are in Ottawa, and Premier and Seamus, you are in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Welcome to everyone watching. I know you're anxious to hear the Prime Minister. So with that, Prime Minister, allow me to virtually pass the microphone to you. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Bonjour à tous. Merci au ministre O'Regan et au Premier ministre Fury de se joindre à nous virtuellement. Last week, our government presented a new, strengthened climate plan, accelerating our work to build a sustainable future. This plan includes concrete measures, like making clean power available across the country that will help Canada exceed its 2030 target. In October, the Canada Infrastructure Bank earmarked $2.5 billion for clean power. They're working with provincial and regional partners to connect Canadians to clean electricity, including through the Atlantic Loop. In our fall economic statement, we also committed $25 million to support clean power through local work like community engagement and engineering studies. Notre gouvernement a promis de dépasser les cibles annoncées à Paris il y a 5 ans et, pour avancer dans cette direction, nous sommes déterminés à délaisser progressivement le charbon pour le remplacer par des sources d'énergie propres, dont l'hydroélectricité. Pour y arriver, nous continuons de collaborer avec les provinces et les territoires, incluant bien sûr Terre-Neuve et Labrador. C'est pourquoi, en février dernier, nous avons annoncé des négociations en vue d'une restructuration financière pour le projet de Muskrat Falls. Nous continuons de croire en son importance et aujourd'hui,